Hey, good day everybody. Today I was flying with a buddy of mine, and he had just recently picked up the Kodiak and was having some trouble with some aspects of the Kodiak. So what I'm going to do is just take her up, maybe fly a circuit, or maybe out and then back in, and teach you a few things about the Kodiak. So what I'm going to do here, set it up for a flight plan to Marawaka. I've already got my VREF speeds in, so I got 63 for the approach, 54 for the rotate. It just gives you nice little bugs here, so you know, alright, I'm rotating at 54 and coming back in at 63. So let's see if it's go to Marawaka's in here. Alright, it doesn't look like it, so go plug this in real quick. Wait, having some trouble with my mouse wheel right now. Actually, it's kind of crapping out on me and not picking up whether it's going forward or backward these days. So, alright, so there we have Marawaka turning OBS mode off so that it actually picks up where we're going. And as you can see, it's still pointed towards where I am right now. So I'm coming over to my flight plan page. Oh, hold on. There we are, Marawaka. Alright, we know that to get through the Marawaka gap, we are going to fly at, we'll do, I think 8,600 is the bare minimum, but I found that depending on the altimeter setting of the day being wrong from Moresby in the game, you actually could use 9,000 sometimes. So anyways, before we take off, so first of all, check out how I'm running my views here. So my Control-Alt-1 or my Alt-1 view is set up just so I can barely see the bottom of these screens. It's going to give me a pretty good horizontal picture out the front of the airplane there. I'm not sitting up super high like this to where I can't see the instruments, and I'm not sitting low to where I can't see out of the plane. In the Kodiak, you actually have really good visibility. Even you can see my short co-pilot here. She can see over the dash just fine. So yeah, so you can see we got a little bit of right rudder trim set up for takeoff. Right rudder trim setting also will tend to change depending on whether you have a right or left cross, when sometimes you need more, sometimes you need less. These levers up here are your seatbelt locks, so when they're unlocked like this, you can actually kind of move around in your seat. You got great visibility looking around, but for takeoff and landing, obviously you want those babies forward locked just in case you smash the plane a little too hard. Yeah, so things to note here: my autopilot, autopilot master, heading, nav, altitude select, FLC, and VS mode, vertical speed mode, we'll talk about when we get in the air. And then your the TAWS inhibit, open that guard, press it, see a little white indicator on your PFD stating TAWS inhibit. And what that's going to do is Betty won't be yelling at you when you're about to land in the mountains. So, alright, so final checks. We've got, it's 19 degrees outside. Come over to our chart. Anybody has this chart if you have this skin. So we got 20 degrees at 5,200, so 5,300 feet. I find you always need to bump it up at least one step in the sim here. So we're gonna go, we'll go 6,000 for 20. See how that rolls. So 1390. And we always practice 50 below that, so we'll go 1340 for 1390. Rotate 54. So final checks: ignition, condition, roll that forward, flaps 20, fuel and harnesses. 1340 for 1390, rotate 54. So you can see prop forward, trim is set. We got right rudder trim in. We got our elevator trim nose down right to where that white line is parallel to the ground. And we're going to release our parking brake, step on our toe brakes, ease the throttle up until we have 2000 RPM, keep bringing the torque up until we have our takeoff torque setting. Make sure that we're not over temping, over torquing like that. You see that NG, and release the brakes. So we would have done a abort brief already, so if we're not 50 knots by the taxiway, we'll abort on the runway. Airspeed live. Here's our 54, and rotate. And then we're going to pitch up for our 73. We have an almost empty airplane today, so that's going to be like 12 degrees, 12.5 degrees up in the sky. And look at that. We have got 1,600 feet per minute. I find once you kind of get out of ground effect, if you're first couple hundred feet off the ground, you gotta lower that nose a little bit to keep that 73. Anyways, alright, so we're clear of obstacles. I'm gonna go ahead and nose down to 5 degrees. Right now I'm still flying the airplane. I hit 85 knots in climbing. I go 10 degrees of flaps. Nose will want to dip a little bit. You just pull back on the stick a little bit. And above 90 knots, we're going to go 0 degrees. And we're going to pull our prop back to 2000 RPM. Usually pull it back to about 2030. And just watch our power setting there. Yeah, 2030, and then it kind of settles down by itself. Alright, so we're above circuit altitude. We're going to turn left for the Marawaka Gap. Now, if you guys watch Missionary Bush Pilot, you'll find, just as I have, that the ITT, like in New Guinea, they're tracking they're usually shooting for about 740 ITT for takeoff. That's the max, and then they roll it back to 720 for the climb and 700 in cruise. Well, we actually sit, I've never even got this thing up to 700, or maybe on a super hot day, but yeah. Alright, so now we're headed up there. So for my good friend out there, I'm going to turn my autopilot master switch on. You can see the flight director came on right away, and now it's holding my 5 degrees nose up position. In my climb cruise, I actually want to do 100 knots because that'll give me the best rate of climb. And also just come back and look at my torque setting. So my torque setting for cruise is going to be 1250, so you can play with that. It's pretty touchy to get it right at 1250. There we go. And then if I want to get the airplane to climb at a certain airspeed until I hit my altitude, I'm going to hit FLC mode. That brings up our little blue numbers on the left side, the top of the airspeed tape, and I can use this scroll wheel, scroll down to bring the number down, which will bring the nose up higher in the air to slow you down, give you more of a climb rate. So now it's going to hold 100 knots until it gets at 9,000 feet. So I'm just going to go ahead, just for education purposes, I'll put it up to 11,000 feet actually, just because we're climbing super fast here. So that's the first mode. So you see it climbed at 100 knots. It was pretty quick, but we got to 9,000 feet. Now it leveled off. Then remember, as we speed up, we take out some of our right rudder trim. Alright, so we're coming over our magenta point there. I hit the nav mode, and boom, it's going to go follow the heading 146 to the Marawaka Gap. So now I'll show you the second means to get where you're going, altitude wise. So The second mode that normally you use for a descent rate is vertical speed mode, or VS. It's to the left side of the FLC button in the down up scroll wheel. So if we want to climb at a specific feet per minute, or descend at a specific feet per minute, that's when you would use your vertical speed. So I clicked vertical speed, and now I scroll down on this to bring my nose up. I don't really have a trick of remembering this, but you can kind of just play with it until you find what works for you. And now it's climbing. You'll see when I hit VS mode, vertical speed mode, it put a little number above the vertical speed tape, and now it's climbing at 1,000 feet per minute until it gets to 10,800, and then boom, it'll level off just like with FLC mode. So FLC mode, vertical speed mode, those things are one or the other, and the altitude select is like you'll never see those on at the same time, because FLC mode and VS mode get you to the altitude mode. Yeah, so you can kind of look at the partitioning white lines in the autopilot. So you can see like this area right here is for your altitude mode, either going down or up, getting to a certain altitude at a certain speed. This right here, you got your autopilot, yaw damper, and I'm not actually sure what XFR is. Transfer maybe. Never used that before. Flight director is the thing that puts your little pink lines. If you're flying, you can turn off your autopilot master and then actually like fly the according to the flight director, and it'll guide you on the right path. And then over to the left side is your navigation stuff. So you've got your heading mode, heading hold mode, and your heading bug, and then your nav hold and your course bug. Your back course and your approach mode, that's what you use for the flying approaches once you get to that point. Yeah, one thing I forgot is once you get up in the air, bypass the normal. That's turn your inertial separator or engine inlet to bypass when you're below 1,000 feet above the ground, or like flying through mountain passes where you're close to the ground. You might suck up a bird, and your ignition as well. So that just makes it safer for you. So you can see now I was just playing with my controls a little bit earlier. That's why I don't have the everything dialed in super hot yet. Yeah, so cruise settings between 5,000 and 13,000 feet, you're going for 1250 on the torque and 2,000 RPM. The RPM is pretty easy to remember. You get up in the air, you retract all your flaps, and then it's 2,000 RPM, anywhere you are. Your cruise settings, so from 0 to 5,000 feet, you're going to set 320 on your fuel flow pounds per hour. Doesn't really matter in game that much how much fuel you're burning, but in real life, like in Missionary Bush Pilot, they use 320 pounds per hour for their flight planning. Therefore, you don't want to go over that. Otherwise, you might run out of fuel on one of your legs. So above 13,000 feet, the torque will drop off, and your ITT will be your limiting factor. So we'll go in this airplane usually around 600 for the ITT. So you can see 1250 on the torque. We're sitting at 592. If we went up to like 13,000 feet, then this might we'd get to 600 on the ITT faster than our 1250 on the torque. So that's what's up with that. So yeah, just about views. So we're at 10,800 right now. I'm gonna descend down to 9,000 feet, just en route here. So roll this altitude hold switch all the way down to 9,000. As you can see, my scroll wheel's bugged. Press my vertical speed mode. You can press your FLC mode as well, and it'll follow a certain airspeed down to that level. But the better way to go, because we're not, well, when we're descending, we can speed up as fast as about 175, 180 knots without overspeeding. But if you plugged your FLC mode all the way up to that, you'd be rocketing towards the ground at like more than 1,000 feet per minute, which isn't comfy on the ears. So we're going to use vertical speed mode, roll that scroll wheel up to put your nose down, and we'll set it at a nice comfortable 500 feet per minute descent rate. What I'd recommend is just get in the plane, climb up, practice rolling your altitude up and down, play with your VS mode, play with your FLC mode to get comfortable with it. And yeah, it's a really beautiful airplane to fly. If you look to our 12 o'clock here, we've got, you can see Yalia Mountain, the volcano mountain, poking over this ridge. And this little saddle right here is the Marawaka Gap. That's what we're shooting for. I've forgotten what altitude Marawaka is, but we're not going to be able to descend until we get past that saddle, because that's the lowest point we can get through in the area. So yeah, so what else is there to talk about? So yeah, in the air, you can roll these back for fun, for realism, and take some time to appreciate the Kodiak 100. You come over to the passenger seats, you've got cup holders in each chair. And you'll actually load, like populate these seats based on your weight and balance sheet. So you come up here, and boom, I think it's more than 150 pounds. You put more than 150 pounds in there, and you put people in the seat. So yeah, kind of fun to play with. I'm going to roll these back because yeah, realism. Yeah, and it's kind of fun just to pretend to be a passenger sometimes. Look at that beautiful view. Yeah, off to the right wing you see here, there's our weather radar pod there. And in case of an emergency, pop this lever first, open the top hatch, pop the second lever, drop the bottom hatch. There's our one fire extinguisher. And there's one on each door as well. Alright, yeah, so TAWs, good idea to have that on while you're flying. See, I'll walk you through a couple of the options in the regular G1000 screen too. Starting from the left, you got map in HSI. So you got detail all, you got traffic, topo, relative terrain. This is all with the inset map here. So traffic will put the if you have other significant traffic with an ADS-B receiver in there, pop that up on the screen. The topo overlays the topography just like on our other map. I like to be like Mr. Ryan there from Missionary Bush Pilot, so I keep this one on relative terrain, and I usually keep this scrolled back to like 10 nautical miles, and that'll tell me if I'm getting anywhere dangerous. Detail all, I want to keep all my airstrips and checkpoints on there. And then layout, you can actually set this as an overlay on your HSI, inset map on the bottom left corner, or straight up off. Next one, next rad, is your weather radar, I believe. And yeah, then come over here. So PFD options, come over here. We got your SVT, like your synthetic terrain. You can turn on and off your heading labels on this white horizon bar here, and you can actually turn off the relative terrain as well. The wind, I like to keep option 1 for headwinds, crosswinds. You can have it option 2 or option 3, actually giving you a magnetic heading for that. So DMEs, bearing 1, bearing 2, that's to do with your like radio navigation. are not using that. Yeah, it tells you like what you're heading for, I guess. Altitude units, there it is. Inches or hectopascals. And meters or feet, if you like that sort of thing. Yeah, altimeter units, same thing. Standard barometric, click that and it'll put that standard baro there. Yeah, we adjust that quite a bit, so we're not going to do that. Oh yeah, your transponder, so if you contact Moresby and they tell you squawk 2544, you come in here, it's on altitude mode code and 2544, and there it is. There's the code, then they can see where you are on their radar screen and track you. Nearest, there's all your significant runways there, and then your alerts coming in airspace and all that stuff. Alright, so I'm kind of intrigued as to why my torque is running away on me a little bit here. I just recently set up my dual throttles, one for the prop lever and one for the throttle lever. Oh, it's because we came down to 9,000, that's why. So yeah, anyways, 1250, 2,000 again, set up, good to go. Yeah, yeah, if you guys want to actually have access to these charts and stuff, you can either make them yourself and print them off. I actually have them printed off sitting taped to my screen, so I have them as quick reference and don't have to zoom in over here all the time. If you go to Missionary Bush Pilots Patreon page, I believe that's where I got them, or else the Missionary Bush Pilots Kodiak course. I managed to get my hands on that while he was testing it out, so that worked out for me, but you can find it on sale most times during the year for 50% off. So alright, so we're rolling past the last couple of hills. You got Samogu over to the right, tucked in that valley there. Gama, we're actually flying just about right over it. There she is. Hello, Gama. And over down that valley to the left, we've got Asiana on the ridge over there. We got Owena, and then a few other airstrips. So it's just a ton of airstrips around this area. So yeah, for flight planning, I generally just click on Goroka. You can start at one of the parking spots there at the NTMA hangar, which is what I like to do, where you can start on runway 17 left, ready to go. Here's Marawaka. You can find it usually because it's just up the valley from Sindeni. And yeah, plug and play. These airstrips, sometimes it's nice to note down the runway headings, and just so you can plug it into your OBS mode. In the mountains here, I find it's not as critical when your approach is fairly high. When you get down into the sea peak area in the lowlands, you can like not see the airstrip at all until you're right on it sometimes, so that's where it's really nice to have. So coming into the valley, we got 7 knots on the tail and 10 knots on the right side. So if you can see the mountains over here, we're going to expect those scooping up over those mountains and dumping down right over here. So right now I'm about 500 feet high coming through the saddle, through the Marawaka Gap, and that should be sufficient. Yeah, if you ever if you wonder about the state of your autopilot, all you have to do is you come down to the top of your PFD, and all the active buttons are listed right here. It tells you exactly what's going on. So it's on like a GPS track on nav mode. Autopilot master switch is on, and it's holding altitude at 9,000 feet. If I turn off altitude mode, see that? Nav mode is just in roll mode now with the autopilot master off. Flight director off, and then autopilot master off starts flashing that yellow, and it gives you an audible alarm. So anyways, I got my hand on the throttle now, and I'm preparing to punch the throttle if need be to head over here. I'm crabbing to the right a little bit just to stay away from this mountain, because we got 14 knots from the right now. This is always a favorite part for me growing up, coming through this saddle, because it meant we are home. Alright, so that is the Marawaka Gap. What I'm going to do now is push my prop forward. We're only 3 miles away from Marawaka, and we've got some pretty severe wind. So what I'm going to do is carefully descend. I'm going to pull my torque back. And I just want to make sure I'm not getting too close to all these mountains here, get caught in some swirlies. I'm just going to keep nice and central down the 2 of these mountains and descend all the way down to circuit altitude. There's Marawaka right down below us. So what why we push our prop forward usually around like 6 miles out is it takes, when you're in cruise mode, you basically decrease the pitch of your propeller, so they're taking, yeah, I guess they're facing more into the wind. Maybe increase, whatever you call that. Alright, I'm gonna take the turn here. See, with the winds, you really notice that they'll start blowing you into the mountains. That's why you want to slow down when you get to this point here. There's Marawaka right there. There you go, 500. What we should have done coming through the Marawaka Gap is flip our engine inlet to bypass and igniters on. And you can actually get a rough idea of the runway altitude by looking at your inset map, or if you put the relative terrain overlay on the large map there. It'll, if it's yellow, it means you're only 500 feet above it. If it's green, it means you're 1,000 feet above it. So usually I look for right where it's on the verge, just turning green, then I know I'm 1,000 feet high, so that's good. I'm going to keep this at 7,000 feet. Just check my setup here. Turn the flight director bars off. So right now we're showing 5 knots from the right and 7 knots on the nose to 9 to 10 knots. So that is going to be a pretty strong tailwind, but I know Marawaka is sufficiently long. I'm going to go ahead and knock my second notch of flaps in early. Slow down. And I'm going to go a little bit long on this leg to give myself time to get set up just because of the tailwind speeds. Alright. You notice when you're turning with sufficient winds too, it kind of throws off your whole visual of everything. Alright, so I'm at 73 with 2 notches of flaps, good to go. Descending 6,500. That picture looks pretty good. And coming around to final, 3rd notch of flaps. The flaps 30, slow to 63, and put in some right rudder trim. Pretty much back where I started. Finish that little teardrop turn and start rolling in the elevator trim backwards. So this is going to be a little bit of a crazy approach because of the wind. 4 knots from the west, 10 knots tailwind. Yeah, 7 to 10 knots. And you see me catching those downdrafts because of these hills off to my left. They're coming up on committed. Look how committed there.
500.
Continuing, we're just gonna keep our airspeed up a little bit just to help bite into the wind. There we are. Throttle back to idle and just hold the plane off until she touches down nice and smooth. Alright, then roll back into reverse thrust and some braking. Don't need to brake that much. And usually around 30 knots I roll it back out of reverse. We'll go into low idle, raise our flaps to 20 for takeoff. Alright, there you have it. Realistic winds. Kind of some craziness going on. Getting blown into the mountains there. That was my bad for not slowing down earlier. But here we are. We estimated 6,000 for runway altitude. Here we are at 6,000 runway altitude. In Marawaka they have a school here, so there's a lot of school supplies coming in here. Teachers, as well as coffee going out because that's the main local export these days. Alright, so before you take off again, always make sure your elevator trim is reset. Otherwise you're going to just dump this thing back. And yeah, the whole bypass thing, not an issue in the game. But it's a good habit to get into just for fun. Immersion. Engine inlet to bypass, takeoff and landing or within 1,000 feet of the ground, and ignition on. So, yeah, just a few points again. Keep your view like this. Oh yeah, I was going to touch on these views. So there's 2 different view menus that you can use. There's the Alt key plus 1 through 0. 1 through 9 and 0, and then there's also the control ones. The control ones are your custom or your I don't know, different menu of views. So I'm just going to run through them. So control 1, look at that, coming down to all our switch panel. Control 2 brings us to the center console and throttle quadrant. Control 3, overhead. Control 4, circuit breaker panel. That was control 5 right there. So if you press control 5, brings me there. Control 5 brings me back out to the regular one. Control 6, MFD. Control 6 brings me back to normal. So any of these you can pair up. If you need to quickly hop over to something, don't play around with your arrow keys. Just hit control 1 through whatever and find out where you want to go with it. So you can even put little labels on yeah, so in the Kodiak, 9 and 0 don't do anything, but yeah, 1 through 7. And then alternate views, so I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 0 is what I have set up. Yeah, so your alternate views, you set all those up with Control Alt 1 through 0, and then from then on you'll be able to press Alt and corresponding number to get where you want. And then the pre-selected views are Control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And like I said, press it again, and it brings you back to your normal view. So, all right. Yeah, the other thing I would get good at is keeping your face position in the same. This is like all of flying, especially when you start out, is based on visual, what you see outside the cockpit. You want your eyes out because that's where the action is happening at all times. So practice holding altitudes, like putting your nose on the horizon for a proper attitude of climb. For the cruise, it's typically a fist on the firewall there, and for a descent, it's fist and a thumb. So you can kind of play around with those visuals as well. And then look at this, like instead of looking around with the keys every time, I got my hat switch. Mine has like 1, 2, 3, 4, I think 8 different views on it. Play around with these keys. I got up and down, kind of traveling around. But yeah, those make it super easy to just look around, and it pops right back to where you need it. So that's a good way to go too. Anyways, welcome here to Marawaka, Papua New Guinea. It's a nice little spot just over the hill from home. If you have any more questions, you can drop them in the comments or message me and I'll take a look at them. Otherwise, thank you and have a nice day.